everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be looking at one of my absolute favorite subjects about writing: how to give your characters realistic flaws. Now, the groundwork for this video is that basically, as long as I've been part of the online writing community, I've seen posts everywhere about the necessity to have flawed characters. A character that has flaws is more relatable, more realistic, and therefore more attractive to the reader. However, writing flawed characters, like really realistically flawed characters, is a lot easier said than done. Because a lot of writers don't know how to actually give their characters, particularly the heroes, realistic flaws, we end up with characters who are morally perfect, but maybe clumsy, or they're just misunderstood, or they just have a dark soul that needs saving. The problem with these kinds of flaws is that they're usually tacked on to the end of a character that's already fully formed without them, so they don't really feel like an integral part of who that character is. So in this video, I want to talk about how to give characters realistic flaws and why it's actually a really, really good thing. Okay, so step number one is to understand what a flaw really is. When we take it down to basics, a flaw is a strength taken to the extreme and then turned against your character. So let's say you have a heroine who is really smart and really good at problem solving, and she's being chased by a serial killer. Well, she's obviously going to use those strengths, her wits and her mind, to stay one step ahead of him. But what if she also used her smarts to subtly manipulate people and keep them between her and the serial killer? Now you've got a heroine who has a serious moral flaw that can be really fun to explore. Or let's say you've got this boy and he's so sweet and he really wants to believe the best in everybody. But because he's always seeing the good in other people, he's trusting the wrong people, and it's leading to more and more problems, and suddenly the plot is just taken off. Well, that's another flaw. Ultimately, a flaw is a crack in your hero's moral facade that allows the ugliest parts of them to show through. Understanding the difference between an actual character flaw and a detrimental trait like clumsiness is a key to getting the sweet balance in representing your character. Step number two, take a hard look at your character's personality. So for a lot of writers, myself included, it's easier to come up with the attractive and personable aspects of your character's personality as opposed to the negative and off-putting ones. This is actually a really good place to start looking for flaws, though. Take a hard look at your character and ask yourself, okay, what are his or her strongest suits? And how can that be taken to the extreme and then twisted around so that it actually becomes a blind spot for them? So maybe your character is really clever, but to the extent that they only trust their own judgment and don't want to listen to anyone else. Or maybe they're a talented protector, but that makes them overbearing to the point where they're suffocating all of their relationships because they can't ever let anyone out of their sight. There are two sides to every coin, a light and a dark. Especially if you already know your character's light side, take a closer look at that, flip the coin, and see what's on the other side. Number three, when you find that flaw, stick it out to the bitter end. One of the best examples I've ever seen of this is honestly my critique partner's story. She has a character who's established as being proud and sensible and prejudiced, and these are his flaws. As time goes on, in each installment, this becomes a bigger and bigger detriment until he's basically mucked up every relationship he has. And honestly, it's beautiful! Because if we're going to write realistic flaws, we can't shy away from the consequences. So maybe your proud character who won't listen to anyone else walks straight into a trap and wreaks havoc on everybody he cares about. Or maybe your overprotector's charge feels so stifled that they run away straight into the arms of the danger the protector was scared of. Ultimately, while it would be easier if characters always had an aha moment before these things happened, good storytelling requires that if we're going to put the flaws in there, we have to see where they go. We have to let the characters reap the consequences. Number four, don't be afraid to let your characters have flaws. As a reader, character flaws can be really hard to deal with, especially if we see the consequences coming from a mile away and the character just doesn't seem to. Whether that's keeping a secret to the detriment of a relationship or stifling one's friend or partner, we've all seen characters go through this and we love to hate it. The thing is, as difficult as these things can be to read and even harder to navigate when we write them, if there aren't flaws or challenges that come from a character's own mistakes, their arc doesn't really have anywhere to go. On the other hand, if a character's pride leads to a fall, then he has to pick up the pieces, learn from his shortcomings, and maybe start to ask for help and advice in the future. Flaws are uncomfortable. We want to see our heroes succeed, and it can be frustrating at times to see their flaws come out, especially if it's the same flaw over and over, and it takes them a long time to grow out of it. But no one is always going to do the right thing all the time, in real life or in fiction. So in the end, it's much more memorable, and in fact, even easier to root for somebody who we see falling, failing, trying over and over and over again. Number 5, keep it ugly. Personally, I found this to be the hardest part about writing a flawed character. There are times when readers assume that however a good guy acts in a book, that must be what the author condones and how they really feel about things. And I honestly believe that this attribution of intention, if you will, has opened the gateway for a lot of these clumsy but otherwise flawless heroes in fiction. Because no writer wants to be accused of being prejudiced or overzealous or prideful or any of those things. But you guys, real is ugly. And a lot of times our good guys, our fictional heroes, have veins of ugliness in them that need to be explored. So I'm going to give a personal example of this from one of my books. I had a character who I discovered in the process of writing had a very vicious streak of nationalism. This was not just pride in her kingdom, but it was like anybody outside of that kingdom was automatically lesser to her. It was difficult, disgusting, and honestly downright rotten to write a lot of her scenes and her internal monologues because of this. But in keeping it ugly, when she and I as her writer emerged on the other side of that conflict, I felt more satisfaction and clarity and even personal understanding than I really have in any character before or since. She had to have that flaw and I had to walk it out as the writer. Because of where her strengths lay, it was the perfect weakness for her to have as well. It fit with her personality, her backstory, and her present day struggles. Now, in my mind, does that make her less one of the good guys because she had that flaw? No, she was a good guy with a serious flaw that needed to be addressed and was addressed in the narrative. As you're plotting and playing out your story, your characters may present with flaws that make you uncomfortable too. They may go against your most deeply rooted beliefs. But I promise you, that's okay. Let them be ugly, let them struggle, and then let them walk out on the other side of it, having grown and become better people. Heroes that your readers are even more able to root for. I want to close by really hitting on why flaws are so important. In flawed characters, I think we readers see a reflection of ourselves. So we want to see characters grow and overcome these struggles because it gives us hope that, hey, I can walk through this too and come out on the other side a better and stronger person for it. So with all the talk that circulates in the writing community about representation in novels, I think we have to be careful to make sure that we're representing the flawed side of humanity as well. We need characters whose genuine growth we can root for, and maybe through that, we find growth of our own.